Hello and welcome to the Guardian Football Weekly. Italy missed a third World Cup in a row. What was unthinkable 12 years ago is now, well, thinkable. They battled so hard with 10 for so long, but the Bosnians held their nerve in the shootout. The streets of Sarajevo filled to bursting while the Azzurri had to deal with reels of people asking Dad what the World Cup was like. Elsewhere, the Czechs saw off Denmark on penalties while Gyökeres won it late for Sweden, who qualified despite only getting 2 points in their qualifying group. And the dark horses Turkey made it, of course they did. A great night for managing expectations for England, defeat and deserved defeat to Japan, who scored a beautiful goal slicing through an anonymous England midfield and defence. They should have been further ahead when Tuchel threw on Harry Maguire and Dan Burn from some real DNA get it launched and almost got something. Perhaps time to reassess the spreadsheet. Also today, Zerbi to Spurs, fan protests and a slightly worrying examination of how he starts at clubs. How many of his 5 years will be in the second tier? We'll do that, answer your questions, and that's today's Guardian Football Weekly. On the panel today, Barry Glendenning, hello.
Hi, Max.
Lars Sivertsen, welcome.
Hello, everyone.
And we had so many messages like this. Matt, no questions. Please pass my condolences on to Nicky. Nick, oh, Nicky, I'm sorry. Mike, no question. Just give Nicky a virtual hug from me. Yes, Bosnia won. Italy won. Bosnia threw on penalties. Nicky, I'm sorry too.
Me too. Me too. Honestly, it was interesting taking in the different way people reacted last night. I feel like, unsurprisingly, on the timeline, you see a lot of anger, and I feel like I'm well past the stage of anger with Italy. It's just this point of quite profound sadness about the fact that this keeps happening, and we keep not getting to have Italy at the World Cup. And I don't know. I don't know if I can say it felt inevitable, because there were certainly points in that game where I thought that Italy were going to get it done, but it doesn't feel like a shock anymore, and that's almost the most depressing part of it all. Is it's not surprising to me, even though I made the argument of why Italy should and are good enough to be at a World Cup. It's not some great shock anymore that they won't be, because we've been doing this cycle now for 3 cycles.
Yeah, and then all these stats come in. John Bruin tweeting Italy's last game at the World Cup finals was Luis Suarez chomping on Giorgio Chiellini's shoulder. Colin Miller saying Italy have not played a World Cup knockout match since the creation of the iPhone in January 2007. Homer's saying kids starting secondary school this year weren't alive the last time Italy played a match in the World Cup finals, and they won't see one until they've begun their GCSEs at the earliest. So I don't know. I mean, obviously you're not in Italy, Nicky, but you've scanned the reaction there. Is that the same feeling there? It has been called an apocalypse before, and now it's more just a kind of,
another apocalypse.
Yeah, another apocalypse. Yeah, I was
Just a
going through the
Calypse.
I was going through the papers just now, and it is interesting because I was going through the old ones actually before the game. I was reminding myself of how the reaction was different each time, and it does feel like, again, that the terms used the first time around were apocalypse, which of course was used by the then head of the Italian Football Federation, Tavecchio, who resigned, by the way, which the current head, despite also presiding over the North Macedonia, so far has not done. But the then head of the Football Federation, Tavecchio, called it an apocalypse, but the newspapers called it a disaster. I think Gazzetta compared it to the Titanic as this mixture of arrogance and softness that had overtaken the Italian game. And this year, I mean, I'm sure if I dig deeper, I'll find those headlines too. But really, all the headlines were just tutti a casa, everyone home. That's it. Yeah, it almost felt more like a not that there's not, again, anger and disappointment, but it's just hasn't got that shock factor anymore. Which doesn't mean that it doesn't carry huge weight for the players. And I've made this point before, and I make it again. There's going to be, at a minimum now, an entire generation, 12 years worth of professional footballers who just don't get to play at a World Cup. And some of them in this group might still have the chance. The one who's going to be, I suppose, the villain of the piece, Bastoni, after his red card, he might get another chance. The one who probably was closest to being the hero of the piece, Donnarumma, who kept them ahead for so long, he will still probably have at least one more cycle. But there are players in this group who've come by and have played their entire careers without Italy at a World Cup, and you feel bad for them, and then you also think, but they at least had the chance to change it. I feel worse, as I always do, for the families who don't get to share it, because I think that's always what I come back to as someone who's loved football for most of my life. It's always the thing I come back to is, well, why do I love football in the first place? And I do think, for me at least, a huge part of that story was watching World Cups, and of course was unbelievably spoiled that as someone in a half English, half Italian family, my very first World Cup memories are from a World Cup where both countries reached the semi-final, and then the next one, Italy are in the final. So there was lots of reasons to feel a special connection to those moments. But of course, we all see the world through our own lens. And for me, those were really formative experiences, watching the World Cups with my family, and knowing that there's going to be, again, even kids who are 20 now, who got to see a World Cup maybe when they were so young they better remember it. That's such an extraordinary, sad thought for me. To which we always have to point the opposite way, which is also to say, but guess what? A group of Bosnian kids do.
Of course. Yeah, they will get the moment. I was almost getting me choked up, Nicky, with how I didn't think I'd be that sad about it. And the thing is, Barry, they started so well, Italy. I think Bosnia deserved it, right? But Italy did start well, and there were moments in this game where you were like, they're going to win it. They go ahead. Moise Keane has that chance, doesn't he, at 1-0? By the time Bosnia equalised, you think, it's late enough that you think Italy are going to hang on.
It is nice that we finally got around to mentioning there were two teams playing in this match and that Bosnia won. I think they thoroughly deserved to win. They had 31 shots, 11 on target. Italy, I'm not going to say they blew it, but they went a goal up and they should have gone 2-0 up. That Moise Keane missed when he was one-on-one with Vasily and failed to hit the target. That probably would have killed off Bosnia and put the game to bed, and Italy would be going to the World Cup. But he missed under pressure. Bosnia came back, bundled home that scruffy goal. And Esposito had a chance near the end where his far post header was saved by Vasily, and Italy messed up the penalties. I'm not sure Esposito should have gone first. I would, put your best penalty taker first. That's probably Sandro Tonali, isn't it? But Bosnia go to the World Cup. They play Canada. They were the second last team to qualify, and they'll be the first team to play in the opener against Canada. So good on them. Yeah, I have to say, I don't feel as sorry for Italy as ye appear to. I've no sympathy for them at all. I think it's mad. They failed to qualify for 3 World Cups in a row, but while failing to qualify for 3 World Cups in a row, they've also won the Euros, which is just bonkers.
Yeah, I think I feel sorry for Nicky. If Nicky was Bosnian, I'd probably be happy for Nicky.
I was wondering there when you were reading all those nice emails from listeners. Was there a similar deluge when Ireland got knocked out, or did you just elect not to read them?
I don't think people feel sympathy. Maybe they do, Barry, but for many other reasons. That red card, Lars, for Bastoni. Yeah. I mean, it is a challenge you just can't make, can you, if you're not going to get it?
Yeah, and it's untypical because if you mentioned, so I want to get with this, I mentioned this with Nicky a little bit about just the general quality of the players they have at the moment. But if you were going to list, they have a handful of players you would consider, globally speaking, to be top international standard performers. And then you'd list Bastoni as one of them. And you're not really expecting sort of an elite level Italian to do something that daft, because surely you have to be aware enough to know a red card is worse than conceding a goal for your team's chances. Everyone knows this now. I think at this point, getting a red card in the first half is considerably worse for your chances in the game than conceding a goal. So if you get beat there and he still needs to get past the goalkeeper, it's a nonsensical challenge to put in from a player who really should know quite a lot better. And I also just want to pivot to this idea of having faced Italy twice in the qualifiers from the Norwegian perspective. You're not afraid of them, really. There are a handful of players who are very good and are playing for very good club sides, But as an opponent, when you're coming up against Italy, what names on the team sheet makes you go, "Oh my God, we have to like that guy's really gonna kill us"? There isn't, and compared to, like, we played a friendly against the Dutch recently, and they were quite a lot better. They were much harder to deal with, and I think the football point of all of this is that the Italians are just not very good at the moment. And are they doing anything to get better in terms of developing players and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I actually want to do what Baz said, which I feel like got said and then didn't get done, and talk about Bosnia a bit, because I do think there's things to say on their side. I thought there were some great performances. But I understand completely what Lars is saying about not the fear factor, because there isn't a fear factor with Italy, and of course there isn't. I think that was actually a big narrative of this game, is that Italy were a team with everything to lose and Bosnia were a team with nothing to lose. And you saw it. Italy were afraid. Italy were afraid from the start. From the very third minute, I think they just gave Memic all the space in the world to put a cross in. And they looked nervous all the way through. I simply can't get with the narrative that their players aren't good enough. There's no world in which you would go through these two starting 11s, go, Italy have the worst starting 11. They've got Sandro Tonali, who's starting for Newcastle. They've got Riccardo Calafiori, who's playing for a Premier League title aspirant Arsenal. They've got Donnarumma, who's playing for the other Premier League aspiring title winners, Man City. They've got Bastoni and Barella, who've played in Champions League finals twice in the last 3 years. You can't tell me there's not talent in the team. That's such a cop-out for me, frankly, and that's one of the reasons I think I rail against it, is because it's too easy to go, this team isn't good enough. The team is good enough. It's not great. It's not one of the best Italian teams, not even close to one of the best Italian teams I've seen, but it's also not the worst Italian team I've seen, and it's better than Italian teams I've seen winning football games, and I think it's too easy just to say the talent isn't good enough. I get that it's not scary good, but it's good enough. But I do think it is less than the sum of its parts. I do think it's fearful. I do think it's been systematically let down by leadership at the Football Federation, and I do think that, without actually wanting to pin it all on him, because I think it's too easy to make him a scapegoat, I think Gennaro Gattuso was not a good enough manager for the job that was required. And I think all those things are true. And I think on the other side of it, that there were some sensational performances from the Bosnians. I thought they absolutely took the game to Italy from the start. I think that the red card is almost, to me, feels like a red herring, because it was 11 shots to 2 for Bosnia by the time that Bastoni went off. So it wasn't like they were struggling in the game before that, even though, of course, you don't know how it might have gone differently once he was on. I thought the way that team was willing to just get on the ball and dribble and run at Italy was perhaps it's luck of the types of talent you have and the types of players you're up against, but it was exactly the right formula to unsettle Italy. Too many Italian players in Serie A are not used to having opponents dribble at them. It's one of the issues I think Italian players are having right now, as they play in a league where people don't dribble. And then they come up against players who'll dribble, like Memic, like Dedic, like in the second half Ale Begovic, who is, I think, going to be a player we talk about a lot more in the next few years. I think he assisted the goal against Wales, and then he scored penalties in both games. Talk about Esposito being a kid who can't handle the pressure. Well, guess what? Ale Begovic is 18 and took penalties brilliantly in both games. I do think there's some really good stuff in this Bosnia team. They're not going to win the World Cup. I'm not trying to blow smoke and pretend that Italy were beaten by some sensational side, but I do think performance-wise in this game, they didn't nick it. They absolutely deserved it. And if anything, well, yes, Italy had chances as well. If anything, I'd say they were the team that should feel worse that it went to penalties. They were the team that had more chances to win the game before that.
I don't disagree that player for player, Italy have a stronger squad than Bosnia on paper. That's fine. But if you then get outshot like 30-10 or something, then clearly something's gone quite badly wrong.
Yeah.
And do you think you have to look at Gattuso a little bit? Is he even the best Italian coach in this playoff? I wonder, with Montella actually doing quite well with Turkey at the moment. I think that's a valid question to raise. And it's, I thought was interesting. So I was watching the Swedes and the Danes. I couldn't speak to the first 90 minutes, but I did watch the extra time. And Italy looked quite dangerous when they actually attacked, which certainly from the numbers, it looked like they were not doing it all within 90 minutes. Were they too... Is it a possibility that they got too buried in their own mythology here, and it was like, oh, we were a man down, but we have a lead, we're just going to bunker down and defend like heroes? Because when they started attacking a little bit in the extra time, they were knackered, surely, yeah, but they were getting into decent positions and they were making things happen. So maybe this is like a team management boo-boo of maybe they should have tried to play some football earlier.
I feel like they've been cowed by the occasion all the way through this playoff. I thought against Northern Ireland, it was only really after the goal that they settled and actually looked like they should do, which is clearly a markedly better group of individual talents than Northern Ireland have. And I think that in this game, they never got to that point of looking like what they should do. They never looked composed on the ball. You saw the quality in moments. I thought the way that Barella, the way they Italy scored their goal, I mean, it was good pressing from Retegui to begin with, but Barella also made a really quick, smart decision to get the ball onto Ken, and Ken took his chance brilliantly. And Ken also very nearly scored another great goal. He was really smart to pounce on that pass by Memic, and he just let down by his finish on it. I think Italy absolutely lack the confidence to be as good as they should be in terms of talent, which is why I keep saying I refuse to let this talent be the excuse, because I think the talent is good enough. The confidence is not. And I think confidence comes from having good leadership, which, yes, Gattuso is... he's not a good enough manager for this team and what they're trying to be. And that's part of it. But of course, I do think they are also weighed down by the history of, oh God, if we do this, it's going to be 3 World Cups in a row. And I think unfortunately, that's also the manager's job, though, to get the players out of their own heads and remind them just to play football, because they know how.
Well, I look forward to this conversation again in 4 years' time.
Oh, God.
In the other playoffs, so Sweden beat Poland 3-2. Baz, Victor Gyökeres in the 88th minute. What a fun goal! I mean, not for the Poles, but just a real ping pong pinball goal to win such an important playoff.
Yeah, so this game, they exchanged goals. Sweden went ahead, Poland came back. Sweden went ahead again, Poland came back. Matty Cash with an assist for that one. And then in the 88th minute, Gustav Lundgren beat Arsenal old boy Jakob Kiwior far too easily down the right and pulls the ball back into the area. A Svensson shot was blocked. Bergvall's follow-up was saved. Best for Zanelli's follow-up to the follow-up hit the post. And then Victor Gyökeres outmuscled one of the Polish defenders to bury the follow-up to the follow-up to the follow-up and send Sweden through a really crazy goal at a late stage of the match, and a fun goal, but as you say, not if you're Polish. That was a heartbreaker, that one.
Yeah, great achievement for Graham Potter, who'll take Sweden to the World Cup this summer. Lots of people, Lars, saying, look, they only got 2 points in qualification. This is ridiculous.
Well, I think having this extra sort of route in through the Nations League is not a bad structural thing, because I think it just keeps excitement alive for more fans for longer, which I think is inherently a good thing. It's not like a bunch of teams are getting in through the Nations League. It's a small route that doesn't apply to a lot of teams, and I think that's fine. I'm glad you mentioned Graham Potter, because I watched both of these games, both the Ukraine game and this. And for me, it's a huge thing by Graham Potter. I think he's got it just absolutely spot on in both games. Both Ukraine and Poland have got better ball players in midfield than Sweden do. And it's not a vintage Swedish generation, certainly not with the injuries they have. But Potter set them up accordingly. They set them up with 3 at the back, just a pretty solid midfield, keep the team compact. Let's not try anything we're not good at, and let the opponent have the ball for quite a lot of the game, just in harmless areas. And then they were very direct going forward, trying to hit Elanga and Gyökeres early and try to exploit the spaces that opened up. And in this game, I think for a long time, Poland looked like the better team here, to be honest. Sweden scored with their first 2 efforts in the game. Like, there was a great shot from Elanga and then a header from a corner, I think it was set piece, from Lagerbielke. But it was their first 2 efforts in the game. I think they had 3 shots at halftime. And Poland deep into the second half, we're playing better football. We're looking like the better team. But Sweden finished strong, and Potter made some substitutions that I think, I mean, if you're looking for your head coach to make moves from the bench, that changes the dynamics of the game. Potter did that as well, and they finished stronger, and it wasn't completely undeserved when they won in the end. And the Graham Potter redemption arc very much afoot here.
You were also watching the Danes for your Nordic brethren. You were watching. Are they Nordic, Denmark? Before I get yelled at.
Yeah,
by
absolutely. Yeah. No,
okay.
They are. I think the big controversy is whether the Finns are Scandinavian or not, which I would say they're Nordic, but not Scandinavian. But there are Finnish people who will be offended by that.
Anyway, look, they went out to Czechia on penalties. What did you make of this game?
So it's a funny one, this was kind of the opposite. I mean, the Danes will have outshot the Czechs by quite a lot. They had 22 shots in the game to the Czechs 9. They had 77% possession across the halves and the extra time, the Danes. But this is why they were in the playoffs as well. Denmark, they dropped points against Scotland twice. Both games they had the ball more, had more chances. They had a draw against Belarus in which they had over 30 shots in the qualifier. They do this sometimes, the Danes. They dominate possession. They create a lot of good opportunities, but they just can't. They're not efficient, and they concede goals too easily. So they were the better team, but the Czechs deserve a lot of credit for, I mean, and this will be familiar to Barry, I guess, from the Ireland game. They're not a good team, the Czechs, but they're physically robust and they're fighters. Like, they don't give up. They keep grinding away. They were second best throughout here, but they always carried a bit of a threat on the counter, and they were physically tough. Didn't make it easy for the Danes, even though the Danes were better than them. And in the end, they were very good from the penalty spot. Like, the penalties were considerably better than the Danish. Poor Rasmus Højlund.
Meanwhile, Barry, the dark horses, Turkey, are through.
They are. I think Japan's cemented the dark horse status for this World Cup by beating England last night. But the traditional dark horse is Turkey, who hadn't been at a World Cup since 2002. They won their place with a 1-0 win in Kosovo. Yeah, I think they deserve to win. It was a Kenan Yildiz show. He was brilliant. Wreaking havoc up the left wing, taking on defenders, pulling balls into the penalty area. And they went close to scoring with one of his pullbacks to Al Turkoglu, and then who couldn't quite get enough welly on the ball to steer it home. And then that was more or less a dress rehearsal for the goal they did score, which had a hint of offside about it, but it was given. I think it was the correct decision, despite the protests of the Kosovans. And they had a late effort from Muslija, a dipping shot that fizzed very narrowly wide. But I think on the balance of play, Turkey deserved to go through. Shades of the Spurs game against Atletico Madrid in the early stages of this game. It was lashing rain, and various Turkish players just could not stay in their feet. They kept slipping, kept falling over. And I was thinking, oh dear, I remember this from a few weeks ago. But I don't know if they changed their studs or whatever, but they got the job done. And they go into a group with Australia, Paraguay, and the USA, which you'd have to say looks pretty open.
That does look open. That will be a fun group, won't it? Okay, that'll do for part one. Part two will be England's defeat at the hands of the dark horses, Japan. Welcome to part two of the Guardian Football Weekly. Tombo says, how relaxed is Barry feeling right now? William says, can we skip to crashing out in the quarters? So we have a sort of neutral / hostile panel to digest this England defeat. I know, I mean, I don't know how many of you, this was not on any of your main screens, I guess, but you will have seen the highlights and stuff. What did you make of it, Baz?
I would read little or nothing into this game. I think the result is irrelevant, but if I was an England fan, I would be concerned by the fact that they didn't have a shot on target till the 77th minute. I know Elliot Anderson curled a shot onto the bar in the first half, but as we know, that doesn't count as a shot on target. But yeah, it wasn't until 77 minutes that Rashford had a shot saved. And then England seemed to resort to getting the big men on and trying to score from corners. And it almost worked, didn't quite. Rodgers shot over after a Dan Burn header was cleared his way. I have a tremendous amount of admiration for Dan Burn and the trajectory his career has taken, and the fact that he's living his best life playing for the club he loves. But I don't think he should be anywhere near an England World Cup team, with the greatest respect. I just think he's too slow. But anyway, he's in the squad. He'll probably be in the World Cup squad. And I'm not sure what, if anything, Thomas Tuchel will have learned from this game or from this international break. I think his decision to pick so many players might have backfired him and given him more problems instead of fewer. And I think possibly the player who's benefited most from this international break was one who wasn't in the squad, Danny Welbeck. Because if I was Thomas Tuchel, I'd be giving serious consideration to bringing him to the World Cup as backup to Harry Kane.
Yeah, possibly Trent, Bellingham. I mean, Kane didn't play either. All these people get better by not playing. I thought Barney made an interesting point in his report saying, look, Japan played like Japan, whereas England played like the latest idea of whatever it is England is supposed to play like. And we get to that stage, Lars, again. And I don't know if I totally agree with Barry that I think you can read quite a lot into this, which is it's the second time Tuchel has played somebody vaguely good. And he's lost both those games, Japan and Senegal. I know it's only a friendly, and they were missing Harry Kane, which is obviously big, right? Harry Kane is good. Hold the front page. But I think it will leave him with a lot of things to think about.
I think you're being a little harsh on Serbia there, Max, but that's fine.
Okay.
I think it's a useful, I think it's kind of a useful failure in the sense that this game posed the question: what does happen if England have to play without Harry Kane? And based on the first hour, not a lot, I guess. I think the Phil Foden false nine thing should probably now be shelved as not being plan A if Kane is missing. I think if you're Tuchel, you look at that and think that didn't work very well at all, and it makes you realize you probably need a centre forward if you're missing Kane, which maybe we did need an hour of football against Japan to learn that, but we certainly have. I do think we had this, which is a pretty classic England international situation. I think you had a lot of guys who wanted to get on the ball. I mean, again, this was not on my primary screen, but I have watched highlights, and you have if you have Palmer, Foden, Rodgers, Mainu to an extent in the same sort of rough area of the field, you have a lot of guys who want the ball at their feet, but maybe not as many guys who wants to stretch the play by making runs off the ball. And then it ends up just being muddled. And I think simplicity is important in international management. I think asking players to set up really intricate combinations and things when they hardly ever train together is not the way. And what we've learned from this is that you need a striker and you need a viable second choice behind Harry Kane. Maybe that's Dominic Solanke. Maybe Danny Welbeck is in with a late shout. Maybe there's a Dominic Calvert-Lewin discussion to be had. Maybe you bring Ivan Toney back from the desert. I don't know. But you need somebody who you can turn to, I think.
Lars, the Japan goal was beautiful, but it did feel like quite easy to get past the entire England midfield and defence.
I don't necessarily want to pick on him, but I do wonder if somewhere out there Ruben Amorim was watching Japan just run past Kobe Mainu and him not tracking back with a tremendous amount of enthusiasm and just going, whatever is Portuguese for I told you so, I told you, I kept telling you. Listen, this is not a big deal, really. I mean, we all know Kobe Mainu's strengths are not the defensive side of the game, but yeah, it did seem a little bit easy. I agree with that.
Yeah, and I suppose in a sense, Nicky, having our expectations managed is good, right? Even though we'll forget about this in 2 months and I will be thinking, plotting the route again to the final, despite plotting it wrong.
I was about to say, was this our Max? Is that your expectations that you're trying to...
No, I mean, the thing is, I don't know. Obviously something happens to me. As Barry knows, I turn sort of Cockney when the England games are happening. And I think actually over the years, even I was quite an old adult when Barry and I started watching these World Cups, but even in the last decade, I've become a bit less kind of Mockney or sort of I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is, but I don't have any expectations this time, actually. I mean, I just think England are probably quarter-final, might get lucky, get to a semi, might get really lucky, get to a final, but they're not, they don't play with the flow of Japan, but they also, there are just teams with better players as well.
I think England are absolutely in the pool of teams that are capable of winning this tournament. It doesn't mean they're going to win it, but they are one of the teams that's capable of winning it. But part of the reason they are capable of winning it, and this kind of throws back to when Lars was talking about the fear factor with Italy. One of the reasons that England are capable of winning it is because they have players who you should be afraid of and who can score goals and win games. And one of them was not playing here, right? The biggest one, Harry Kane, who is having an extraordinary season at Bayern Munich. And if ever there's going to be, at this point of his career, the World Cup that becomes his World Cup, this is it, right? So I do think England are capable of winning it. But I think that puts them, for me, in a pool of teams. That doesn't mean they're going to win it. But yeah, I think they can win it.
I must admit, Barry, I absolutely loved Tuchel looking to his bench and just finding the two largest objects he could find. And just lobbing them into the penalty area and thinking, I mean, I know they're nominally centre-backs, but they create all sorts of, actually, given how the world set pieces are so important in international football, it may not be a stupid idea to have, Maguire might be fifth choice centre-back, but instead of Chalobah, and they don't start, and if 10 minutes are left, they can still do a job at the back. I agree, Dan Burns' turning circle is, questionable if up against Mbappe or, Lamar or whoever. But, yes, I quite liked proper getting it launched for 10 minutes.
Yeah, it's not unthinkable that Harry Maguire or Dan Burn or Trevor Chalobah could nick a last-minute equaliser at a corner or from a free kick. And so it's good to have that option. It's a bit basic and route one, but who doesn't like to see it getting launched to the big man? You'd hope, from an England perspective, it wouldn't come to that, but it may well do. And why not? Yeah. I was if I was Tuchel, I'd be slightly concerned by the manner in which Japan, who I thought played very well actually, and Lars mentioned there that if you're an international manager, it's overcomplicating things and having these intricate passing moves is perhaps a bit ambitious, but I thought Japan did that very well. And the way they switched the ball out wide, then cut inside and got crosses or deliveries into the box, I thought I was very impressed with them, I have to say.
And of course their fans picked up all their litter. It's getting performative now, isn't it? They're not nice anymore. They just oblige you to do it. They probably hate their parents, don't they? For authentically picking up litter.
Could we develop some kind of dressing room cleaning one-upmanship here? Will we start trying to be the best at that as well? Will that be the next? The marginal gain will be to get the fumigators in, get
paint
the thing to paint it, redecorate it. Really, maybe put in some new hot tubs. Just really. It was a tough call nicer than when you arrived.
It was a tough call between Cole Palmer and Phil Foden, but Cole Palmer can grout a bathroom, and so he's in, and he's going to the States. Anyway, of course, we'll do a lot more England during the World Cup until we get knocked out on penalties. Scotland lost 1-0 in their friendly with the Côte d'Ivoire. Nicolas Pepe scored the only goal of the game. Scotland were booed off at the break. Ewan Murray said in his match report they're lacking quality up top, which I think you probably, Baz, could say since Dalglish. When was the last brilliant Scotland centre forward or number 10? McAvenny?
Scott McTominay.
That's too generous. Well, okay.
I can't remember. Well, not, with all due respect, not Lyndon Dykes.
You have to manage it. The Côte d'Ivoire and Japan, the teams they've both played, are not bad football teams, right? And, Scotland's group is about beating Haiti by a lot and then clinging on to Brazil and Morocco, right? Who are two very good football teams. Elsewhere, Gianni Infantino says Iran will be at the World Cup. He announced on Tuesday they'll play their group matches in the US as scheduled, despite the war. He made an unannounced appearance at yesterday's friendly between Iran and Costa Rica, and he said, Iran will be at the World Cup. That's why we're here. We're delighted because they're a very, very strong team. I'm very happy. I've seen the team. I've spoken to the players and the coach, so everything is fine. It sort of feels like he's making promises that perhaps aren't his to make.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. This is the first I've heard of this, but is it his decision to make whether Iran play at the World Cup or not? And then if they do play, will their fans be allowed to attend matches? Will their players be allowed into the country? A lot of questions.
I mean, they have to. I mean, this is the basic requirement for being a World Cup host. If you don't let the participating nations and their fans into the country, then someone else needs to host a World Cup. Like, this should be a very simple conversation. I think with Gianni Infantino's FIFA, it might not be a simple conversation because ethics are kind of out the window a little bit.
If both the USA in Group D and Iran in Group G finish as runners-up in their group, they're scheduled to play each other. So, which would be fascinating. Of course, the war is still happening. So, Donald Trump says every week it'll be finished next week. He's back to the grouters of the shower, isn't it? It's a bit like the builders doing your kitchen. It'll be done next week. But anyway, it's a pretty grim situation, isn't it? On those results, then, the other two qualifiers, the last two qualifiers are DR Congo, who beat Jamaica 1-0. Axel Tuanzebe with the only goal in extra time. That game was in Mexico. And Iraq beat Bolivia 2-1, Lars.
Yeah, huge for Iraq, obviously, who their players, and they have quite a lot of players who play in the domestic league in Iraq as well. So some extraordinary scenes for them. Disappointing if you're Bolivia, but that is quite something. And also, like, DR Congo, I think it's their first World Cup, isn't it? I mean, they were in there as Zaire back in 74, but as DR Congo, I don't think they've qualified before. And I was looking, there's quite decent players on both teams here. Jamaica really, I'm not sure how Jamaica managed to not finish above Curacao in their qualifying group when they've got like quite a lot of good players. I mean, I think they were led by Steve McLaren then. I mean, he has some things to answer for here. Both of these teams are pretty decent, DR Congo and Jamaica, and will be a fine addition to the World Cup. But yeah, great for Iraq.
Yeah, DR Congo will have Portugal, Colombia, and Uzbekistan. Iraq joins Senegal, Norway, and France. Graham Arnold, former Socceroos manager, is Iraq's manager at the moment. Welcome to part 3 of the Guardian Football Weekly. So Tottenham have appointed Roberto De Zerbi as their manager, their third manager of the season, following the departure of Igor Tudor. His Premier League record: played 70, won 26, drawn 19, lost 25, an average of 1.39 points a game, which Spurs would probably take for these next 7 games. They've given him a 5-year contract, which seems bizarre since he certainly hasn't ever stayed at a club for anywhere near that amount of time. There are 2 conversations here. There's the football conversation and the moral conversation. Lars, you had done some sort of a little bit of digging on what he's like when he first arrives at a club, given Tottenham have 7 games to maintain their Premier League status.
Well, if by doing some digging you mean read an interview with Lewis Dunk, then yes, there's some real dig. There are some quotes that have resurfaced and I think have been published in most outlets now. Because Lewis Dunk in 2023 told The Telegraph that, if I'm honest, the first couple of weeks were horrendous, which given the importance of the first couple of weeks here, he says, I wouldn't say horrendous. They were baffling. The first meeting when he went in, I was so confused who to look at, what to listen to, and you slowly pick up. Basically, don't listen to the manager, wait for the translators to speak, and you get there in the end. I mean, I'm hoping his English has gotten better since then. Training changed dramatically. We worked on a lot of different stuff, and the first couple of weeks were really hard transition. Maybe this is all invalid, because I'm assuming Roberto De Zerbi realizes he's taking over a team that's in dire straits, that team that doesn't maybe have some of the types of players he would normally want to work with, and that he has no time to implement anything, and that he's just going to set them up in some kind of vague mid-block and try to get them to win a game or two to not get relegated. So I'm assuming there's enough of a pragmatist in him to not try to go full De Zerbi ball from the off, because then Spurs are getting relegated, like if they do that. But does De Zerbi have a pragmatic bone in his body, Nicky?
I'm not sure, to be honest with you. I'm not sure that he does. He hasn't been pragmatic that often in his career. He tends to do things his way, and his way has been overall more successful than not, I suppose, with plenty of ups and downs. But certainly some bright parts of the Brighton chapter. Certainly the getting Marseille into the Champions League was a significant feat. But yes, it is a very intense kind of football. It is a very demanding kind of football. It is a kind of football that raises questions about how quickly it can be installed. But this is why I'm sure this is part of why he's wound up with a 5-year contract. To come back to Max's surprise about all that, the reason he's got a 5-year contract, I do not doubt, is because he held all of the leverage in this conversation. Zerbi was probably quite happy to sit out and wait until the end of the season and wait for a different opportunity, but Tottenham absolutely desperately need a manager right now, and I haven't been privy to the details of this contract, but if I was a manager taking over there right now, I think I'd probably want a contract that said both, you have to pay me for a long time if this goes wrong, but also I have an option to walk away. And I don't know if he's got that, but if I was negotiating for him in that position, I think that's what I would have asked for. So it certainly feels like the stakes are as high as they can be for Tottenham. But at the same time, even with a generous contract, I'm certain he hasn't taken it on, and as he believes, he can turn this into a success and get them out and then be the person who gets to take the project forward.
5-year deal, there's no break clause, and it makes him the third highest paid manager in the Premier League after Pep and Mikel Arteta. And
is he that good? I mean, that's the status. I agree with Nicky. He's got the leverage.
Look, Spurs were desperate. I have no idea whether he keep them up or not, or even if they do stay up, how much of it will be down to him. When he started at Palermo, he won once in his first 13 games. When he started being Viento, he won none of his first 9. When he started at Brighton, he drew 2 and lost 3 of his first 5. Spurs games, remaining games, are Sunderland away, Brighton, Wolves away, Villa away, Leeds, Chelsea away, and Everton. They're all tough games.
They are.
I just think.
Sorry, I was hoping for just like a bit of hope at the end of that sentence, Barry. It just ended. There you go. Yes, Lars.
Yeah. So if we're doing the football bit and saving the moral elephant in the room until later, let me just say that if this was last summer. This was in the middle of the summer. Ange is gone. You have like the 6th, 7th biggest budget in the league, and what you want is someone who has a bit of X factor about him, who could potentially elevate the club above his stature, someone who is a tactical innovator, someone who has a high potential upside, but a downside, but someone who could, in the best case scenario, lead you to punching above your weight. I don't think De Zerbi is a bad bet if that's the situation. I think that would be a very logical step to go down. But that is not the current situation. The current situation is that you haven't won in 13 or something. Half the squad is injured. And by the way, all the guys who are good on the ball are amongst the injured. You're hiring a guy who famously likes to produce like intricate passing patterns with a team that's famously bad at passing. It's a very, very strange choice. Like if they'd have just gotten a safe pair of hands to get them across the finish line and not get them relegated, and gotten someone like De Zerbi in the summer, that would be logical. But for him to come in, he's going to have to do things differently than he's done before. But that's for sure. He definitely doesn't have the time or the players to do all the stuff he wants to do immediately. So you are hiring someone, and you're betting your Premier League status on him being able to do something different than what he's been successful with in the past. That doesn't feel good. So I do think he's a very good manager in a lot of ways, but it seems like a very dangerous time to appoint someone like him. I mean, you can just imagine now you got João Palhinha and Kevin Danso baiting the press and trying to. I mean, this sounds terrible. Like I'm terrified of that. That's not what you want to see.
No, and also, if the general view is, he's not necessarily the guy to keep them up. Wait till the summer, because there'll be lots of managers available, of which Roberto De Zerbi is one, and you have more leverage, and you don't have to give him a 5-year contract. Anyway, that's the football part of it. And the moral part of it, the Tottenham Hotspur Supporters Trust held an emergency board meeting on Monday night, and they contacted the club to say they can't support the appointment. While we recognise the limited pool of managers with recent Premier League experience and the need to act with urgency as Spurs face the prospect of relegation. This appointment raises serious and far-reaching concerns. Many fans have been in touch with us to urge to communicate the strength of feeling. De Zerbi's comments about Mason Greenwood were unnecessary, ill-judged, and deeply offensive to a significant number of supporters, and without doubt will have left victims of male violence alarmed. We believe these statements left unchecked will create a divide amongst supporters at a time when we all need to be pulling together to back the team. It is concerning that the club would put us in this position right when the team needs fans the most. Fans are rallying behind All Together Always initiative, and this appointment places heavy strain on that unity. If those remarks reflect his genuine views, they cast a troubling shadow over the values of a club we love. De Zerbi on Greenwood said, I don't want to get involved in anyone's private life. I don't even get into the private lives of my children because I want to give everyone their freedom, he told a pre-match news conference. All I can say is that Mason seems a good lad. He paid in a strong way for what happened. He has probably here found the right environment for him, which gave him affection and held out its hand to him. When I look at him as a person, I feel sad for what happened in his life without getting into the details, because the person I know here is very different to the one that has been described, especially in England. It is important that we say that Mason Greenwood was charged in 2022 with attempted rape, controlling and coercive behaviour, and assault, occasioning actual bodily harm. The Crown Prosecution Service discontinued the case in February 2023 after key witnesses withdrew their involvement and new material came to light. Greenwood had denied the charges. And it is, on one hand, Barry, not complicated at all, but there is a sliding scale of morality, and you have to be careful without talking about names, but football has a terrible relationship with domestic and sexual violence. There are former Tottenham players who are lauded, who have been accused of domestic violence. There are players who play now who have been accused of sexual assault, and we haven't had statements from the trust. At the same time, in a world where almost no morality exists, it feels good that a club, a supporters group, have come out and said we don't like a thing that is bad.
Yeah, 3 different fan groups have said they don't want De Zerbi in charge because of his support for Greenwood, a player who faced accusations of rape and domestic violence. I would wholeheartedly disagree with his assertion that Greenwood has paid a heavy price for what happened, because I would say he hasn't paid any price at all. He's currently thriving in League One. I also would, up to a point, say, kind of agree with De Zerbi saying, my experience of him is a great lad. He's sort of saying, I take people as I find them, and I find him to be a nice guy. But we've all heard the tape, we've all seen the pictures. And it's a matter of fact, I think, that at his opening press conference, as Spurs manager, De Zerbi is going to have to field a load of questions about Mason Greenwood. And is that how you want to start the new reign of this new manager who's been brought in to save your club? It's quite easy. You would think it should be quite easy to just hire a manager who hasn't openly supported someone who has been accused of domestic violence and sexual assault. It shouldn't be that hard. But it is also important. De Zerbi hasn't been accused of any of these things. He's just spoken up for a player.
Yeah. Nicky, what do you make of that?
Yeah, I think it's just feels like another reason to not make a decision when you know, amongst all the other reasons we've just talked about in footballing terms, that there's lots of footballing questions about it. If you know that your fan base is opposed to an appointment, it feels like another good reason not to make the decision before we even enter into the merits of it, which I think Barry has spoken to quite well there. I think I do think these issues are really fraught because there is not going to be one universal opinion among Tottenham's fan base on it. I can only speak to how I would feel about it, and I would feel very uneasy about it as a fan. So I certainly position myself with all those people who've spoken up against it. And I think it's also quite a brave thing to do, to speak up against it when you're a fan group, because I also recognise that those groups that, as Barry said, 3 supporters groups who voice their opinions about it. I believe there were the Tottenham Women's Supporters Group, there was a LGBTQ plus group, and there was also a group that was, I'm not certain because I haven't got them in front of me, I believe it's another one that was a supporters group that centres on diversity in fan groups more generally. And those are groups that already might not always have universal support from their own supporters group, and you risk putting yourself up there and getting blowback for that opinion as well. So I don't know. I think it's a situation that could have been avoided. It's a situation that could have been avoided. I don't know how to say it better than that.
I really get what you said, Max, about how it feels at times as if football has become this completely amoral space. And there's something almost reassuring about having fan groups who actually, because the cliche about fans is that they won't care as long as you're winning games. I mean, the thing Harry Redknapp once said about like fans would be perfectly happy to have Saddam Hussein own their club if he puts money in and they win games. You know, there's only one Saddam Hussein, and certainly we have examples in recent times of fan bases being perfectly happy to accept whatever involvement your club has as long as it brings more success. So I just think in this case it was heartening to see the fan groups make such a strong statement as that. And it's also just, I think you can end up, like, if you want to coach at the highest level, you can end up in a situation where you have people in your squad who has been the subject of accusations, proven or not proven, and that can be a difficult thing to like maneuver. But you make choices in terms of what you decide to say out loud. Like he might have been in a position where like you don't necessarily pick the ingredients as a head coach. Maybe it wasn't his decision to bring him in, whatever, but it's certainly his decision what kind of tone he chooses to adapt when talking about him in public. And that applies to other coaches in the game and other players as well. I'm not sure what we're allowed to say and not allowed to say, but it always occurs to me that you have a choice in terms of how you talk about these things. And he has certainly made a choice that I think he'll have to find some good answers for. And really, it's another reason with all these uncertainties around his viability as a short-term appointment, like just that factor alone, the fact that you're bringing in someone who will very obviously be divisive is kind of, this is not a great time to hire a very divisive guy when you have 7 games left to save your status in the Premier League. Like it's a slightly baffling decision to me.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I've written a few pieces about this kind of thing, and they're impossible to write because you can't name any names generally, and so you have to be so vague that your article doesn't really make sense. Or if you do name somebody, the lawyers get involved so much, but by the time your article has been published, it reads to you like some sort of PR piece. I won't name the player now, but on one specific player who was bought by a club, and everyone said, "Oh, he's not just a great footballer, but he's just a wonderful human being." And I was sort of screaming, going, "Why is no one saying, well, there was this thing, right, that happened?" And as somebody who's done a lot of work for Women's Aid and who work with survivors of domestic and sexual abuse, and it's for most of us who have never ever seen this or have any idea about how this exists, it's so much more complicated. You have until I sort of listened to survivors about it, you have such a sort of basic view of, oh, well, just leave that relationship. You just leave, wouldn't you? Or things like the really stupid sort of binary views of this kind of thing. Like it's just so important to like listen to survivors of this kind of domestic and sexual abuse. And I saw an excellent tweet, which I'm probably going to misquote, but just said, like, it is, if you think it is woke to support survivors of domestic and sexual abuse, then the internet has rotted your brain. And I think that is certainly my view of this situation. But yeah.
Also, just fundamentally, I think if we've learned anything from the last few years of the world, men saying the phrase like I know about the allegations, but he seems like a nice guy, like just get that in the bin. Like you should never say that sentence out loud ever. The second you ever say that sentence out loud, you're in the wrong, and you need to have a think about a lot of things.
Yeah, I completely agree. Anyway, that will do for today. Thanks, everybody. We covered a wide range of stuff, as we always do. And again, commiserations again, Nicky. I don't know if you can turn yourself into an England fan for the World. I wouldn't advise it, actually, thinking about it, but just delays the pain. But thanks for coming on.
I've always been happy for England when they win as well. I'm half English. I'm as much English as Italian. I don't disguise that I lean more Italian when it comes to football, but I'm not going to be. I'm definitely not going to be sad for England do well. I hope they do.
Yes, as Barry does, of course. Thank you, Barry.